All right. Good evening, everyone. So we'll be dealing some important issues, both from prelims and mains perspective today. And the first important issue, as per the date today, whatever articles that we've had, out of all those articles, the most significant one would be the 25th anniversary of the statehood. 3 different states: Chhattisgarh, Uttarakhand, and Jharkhand. So today we are discussing this GS2 topic of federalism. So center-state relations, federalism, and demand for statehood. Okay? This is the theme that we will be discussing, and not just the specific article of federalism where 3 different states are discussed. We have to look at this issue from a conceptual or a thematic lens, where we are talking about the logic behind creation of the states and its link to governance as well as regional aspirations. So if I have to create a conceptual map here, I have to link it to GS1. Which topic? Perfect. Regionalism. What is regionalism? What is an ism? An ideology which stems from the fact that you are feeling affinity towards your region. Okay? So this is regionalism. When there is a political touch to this feeling that you are not getting your due respect or due share in the developmental narrative, in that situation, this regionalism takes a political connotation, a political flavor, and then becomes a demand for statehood. And from this GS1 regionalism, we move into the domain of GS2, that is federalism. Clear? So, in the history, post-independent history of India, you have seen many states come into existence. The first, iteration started in 1956 with the State Reorganization Committee. There was a debate. Language, should it be considered one of the factor for creation of statehood? There were many committees before that. Let's say, for example, JVP committee. Should we or should we not use language as a metric for creation of state? They felt language alone cannot actually satisfy the criteria. And then finally, after a long debate and the struggle of Sri Potti Sriramulu Garu, you've had the creation of linguistic states through the State Reorganization Committee's recommendations, and the state of Andhra Pradesh, and many other states came into existence. So, language as a subnational unit was an idea that was existing way back in the independence movement only. Congress working committees, if you see, Pradesh committees as they were called, they were having a history of this language-based, committees, because it was easy to mobilize people because of this cultural similarities. So, when you are discussing this idea of regionalism, you will see 2 facets. Should we take a region only on the basis of a political factor or political or administrative factor, or should we take cultural units? This is the debate that has been ongoing. Okay, so will culture alone sustain the demand for a statehood? Not necessarily. So you need to be pragmatic enough to balance the regional aspirations with the administrative feasibility. And sometimes, even when those regions cannot generate the kind of revenue, the state should contribute to the regional development of that area to keep the subnational unit intact. Otherwise, it will create instability within the country. This is the overall idea of regional planning, and when it is viable administratively, states were formed. This is the larger context. 25 years ago, 3 different states were created, namely Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Uttarakhand. Back then, Uttaranchal was the name. So, what were the reasons for creation of these states? Because most of them were anyway speaking Hindi only. So, if language is the only metric, that wouldn't have been the reason. Let's say, for example, in Jharkhand, you would notice that the demand was contingent on an Adivasi, identity, a respect for their way of life. In the Indian Express article that I posted on the Telegram channel and also here, you would notice that the author uses the word Jharkhand was created on the premise that our way of life is different from the Dikus or the outsiders. This mutually exclusive way of life, where nothing was common, was the premise of the creation of the state of Jharkhand. Did the promise of Jharkhand actually get fulfilled? Not yet. We still have the governance fractures, service delivery failures, and on all the social metrics, Jharkhand is yet to do well, despite having a significant wealth in terms of natural resources. So the so-called resource curse. What is this resource curse? A state has natural resources, and yet they were not able to leverage that. Jharkhand is still facing that. Take the case of Uttarakhand. If you consider historically the difference between Uttar Pradesh, the combined state, and the region of Uttaranchal, they were doing better in most metrics, social indicators, whether it is the sex ratio, education, literacy, urbanization, all these metrics, they were doing better. But somehow this feeling of relative deprivation and the respect for their identity, the Kumaon culture, that was what instigated a demand for a separate state. If you see today, Uttarakhand has indeed progressed in a lot of metrics. Even today, social indices wise, it's doing much better than the parent state, that is Uttar Pradesh. You can compare any data. For example, National Family Health Survey, round 4, round 5, which happens every 10 years. Not necessarily 10 years, but usually 10 years. You will see the difference in the indices. They were doing well. And yet, it has its own set of challenges. Which being, what are the challenges of Uttarakhand? Biggest challenge? The clue is in geography. 86% of the state, the land is made up of mountains, hills. And that hills and mountains are not any stable ecosystem. They're ecologically very fragile, young sedimentary rocks where the lithography is not conducive for massive development. What do you mean by lithography? What is graphy? Study of something. Lith means rocks. So the region is geologically very fragile. You cannot expect massive development to hold that region. Like that region cannot hold such massive projects. On the top of that, when you put population pressure, when urbanization increases, tourism increases, it will lead to population pressure. As a consequence, what happens? The carbon footprint increases, and the effects that are already existing will be amplified because of climate change. And this climate change will make that region an unsustainable ecosystem to live in. Clear? So the gap between the haves and the have-nots, unless and until there is a governance system in place, will be amplified if the state doesn't act. Now let's contrast that with the Chhattisgarh. Whenever we think of Chhattisgarh, the first thing that strikes us, Naxalism, left-wing extremism, the backward districts of Bastar. If you take a look at the aspirational districts, you will find districts of Chhattisgarh. At one point of time, it was considered a punishment posting, those regions, for bureaucrats. And if you see, out of the three states, the state that showed the highest promise has been Chhattisgarh. There are many case studies too. Many officers who were also president awardees in these districts of Bastar have shown tremendous promise. Some of them also went on to become, legislators themselves. They went on to become politicians. But for the right reasons, I hope. They've lived through many examples. They became role models for that specific geography. You can go and check the case study of O.P. Chowdhury, who happens to actually create this education city in the Bastar district. Later on, he went on to become a candidate, one of the candidate from that region to contest in elections from a political party. But more than that, he was also a President Medal awardee for his work. And also there was another officer, I'm not able to recollect the name, maybe Nibu Alex, I think. He was also instrumental in urbanization of that state. He was in fact kidnapped by Naxals. He was held hostage. Unfortunately, one of his team members were also killed in that period. And yet he was able to come out, negotiate with them, come out, and I think, if I'm not wrong, it's under his leadership only the new smart city of Naya Raipur is coming up. If I'm not wrong, just check once again. So this state has shown tremendous progress in all the social indicators and even in terms of development. These three different states tell us one common theme. Creation of statehood doesn't necessarily guarantee progress or development. It's the bare minimum platform that you have to act upon it and create an opportunity. Just because you are given an opportunity doesn't necessarily mean you will become a star. You've had multiple examples even in sports. We know, uh, even when we don't want to name the specific person, but it's a sad reality that both Vinod Kamli and Sachin Tendulkar, who were stars in their own way, who were a part of a record partnership at school, they went on to have a partnership of 650 odd runs in a local tournament. Both of them were considered child prodigies. In fact, if you take a look at the debut of Sachin Tendulkar, it was a very mediocre one. Nothing to remember. A duck, maybe, and 30 odd runs in the second innings. Compare that with Vinod Kamli, who's had 3 consecutive centuries back to back. Anyone who looked at both those people wouldn't have imagined how these two people ended up today. Opportunities is just a platform. The game begins there. What really made the difference? How you use that opportunity. It's not just about individuals. It's also about systems, institutions, organizations. When you are given an opportunity, how do you leave a legacy depends on your actionable agenda. Every single activity that we do should be, adding up. And it requires planning, execution, and most importantly, the most overlooked aspect, follow-up, monitoring, creation of grand ideas and not following up, not monitoring, will eventually make the systems crumble under their own weight. Any political analyst and public administration specialist, if they have to compare Chhattisgarh with Jharkhand, they will eventually boil down to governance only. Many case studies, if you take a look at Niti Aayog's repository, waste management, wastewater treatment, recycling the natural resources, waste, how to generate wealth out of waste, how agricultural sector has been leveraged to generate income for the tribals. Many case studies, they are from Chhattisgarh. Chhattisgarh has been an overlooked state for many decades, both by bureaucrats as well as politicians, and yet inch by inch, that governance systems have transformed the image of the state. Yes, even today, if you compare, it's going to be much more boring than the well-to-do South Indian states. But if you see where they have begun and where they are now, what matters is not the heights to which we reach, but the depths from which we rose. So, always remember, federalism is not just about creation of that platform. It begins there. If you want to transform that opportunity into a legacy, it requires us to build institutions which have accountability, transparency, and outcomes as the ingredients that drive them. And this is the first article that I wanted to discuss. Clear? Hidden cost of polluted groundwater. See, when you're talking about a natural resource from a geographical standpoint, how do you study any natural resource? Let us understand. What is the purpose of reading about a natural resource? Firstly, you will get to know the potential it has. Today, the fact is, India extracts nearly 25% of the groundwater that is available across the world, according to some reports. On the surface, we are polluting the rivers, Below the surface also, we are polluting it. Don't you see a taken for granted attitude here? Why are we not treating water with due respect it deserves? And ironically, Indian civilization knows the importance of water more than anybody else. Take a look at our history. Where did they start? Indus Valley civilization. Where? On the banks of a river. The Vedic civilization. On banks of river. Great Magadhan Empire. On the banks of a river. Every major kingdom that created history had access to what? A river, water. Do you see a major kingdom which became an overarching power just because of groundwater? No, right? Do you see a major empire coming up from Thar desert? Not really. Why? They had a different skill set. But it would be difficult for that kingdom to sustain without depending on an external agent. And you cannot defy the fundamental laws of nature. Any civilization cannot thrive without nature. Clear? So, if you are preparing on the theme of water, divide that into surface water, groundwater. Not just that. Take a look at the total available fresh water. 97% of the water that is on the earth is in oceans, practically useless for human consumption. Rest 3%, out of that, most of it is in the form of glaciers. Whatever is left out is there in the form of rivers, underground water, lakes, that's all. And whatever water vapor you find in moisture. That's about it. So if you don't respect the minuscule amount that is accessible to human beings, we are going to pay a price. Right. For that practical reason, you need to understand the geological, geographical, economical, social, environmental implications of disturbing the water cycle and the system. What do I mean by water cycle? Because water is treated like a renewable source. We feel that water is abundant and we're taking it for granted. But in any system, there is one concept. Let's say there is a well and it has some water. If you are extracting water out of it, if the natural process is to be respected, it will take some time again to refill this. Let's say there is a monsoon and for that season this well is full. But if your rate of extraction is much higher than the time it takes, you are disrupting the cycle. This disruption disobeys one of the most fundamental logic of a system. In any system, there will be an element of time lag. Why are we considering petrol as a non-renewable source or oil, crude oil? Because it will take tremendous time for the natural resource to be produced again, and it doesn't necessarily happen because the creation conditions they're not present here. Similarly, we are calling this a renewable system because we are seeing the replenishment in that aquifer within a expected periodic range only. Every season we are seeing that these wells are getting full. But what if that changes? What if that element of predictability is gone? That will disrupt the systems. This is the logic behind why we shouldn't indiscriminately extract the natural resources, because it will become unsustainable. You understood the logic, but in your answer you have to quantify the damage that this disruption will do from a sociological standpoint, from an economical standpoint, and environmental standpoint. This is where you will see multiple articles coming in various directions. This particular article is talking about the economical cost that this issue can create. Not just that, it's also talking about the peripheral aspects. Economic cost will have a social consequence, right? If you are losing money, whatever problems that are existing in the society together, that will get even worse. The rich and the poor will face a disproportionate burden. And this is true not just for water, any natural resource. Why is understanding sociology or society important? How are they interlinked? In a very rigid, closed system of human relations, like say for example caste, unless and until there is a GS2 policy that will disrupt these traditional structures, the ability of these social groups to access natural resources will always be disproportionate. That is the link between, okay, let me put it this way. Let me show you a map. GS1, geography. In this, you are talking about water. Society, we are talking about access. Why? Because we are talking about social structures. Then we are talking about GS2 through policy plus constitution. These together will impact economics. This is what I am saying. Is it clear? Traditionally, your ability to access natural resources depended on a traditional social structure. Let's say, for example, caste. I'm not talking about water alone. In general, the thought process involved, concept, okay? This caste needs to be disrupted because this is very rigid. There is no access to lower rungs of the ladder in pre-independent India. Okay? So this was created through Article 14 to 19, right to equality, and the ensuing concept of equity. It dismantled this existing structures, social structures. So this will have an impact on our access to natural resources. People who were not able to access this, I'm not talking about water alone, I'm talking about any natural resources. Okay? People who did not have access will now get an access. This was the original design. This was how it was intended. Clear? Now, just because you want this to happen and you put up a law without a change in the attitudes of the people, you will not see this actually turning into a reality. Is it clear, everybody? You want this to happen, but will it happen depends on, again, society only. And this process is slow. This is the policy as well as the sociology aspect of it. If you go back to the natural resources, the geography aspect of it, when you don't recognize that this is a limitation and this process is not as quick as it is supposed to be, what will happen? Inequality will be accentuated. The wider inequalities will be perceived. So, let's say, for example, if climate change is the reality today, and you want, let's say, for example, at the time of independence, the gap is, let's say, X. Because of policy, it is now, say, let's say 0.5x. We did progress, but this has not changed. The access to this has not changed. It's very slow. We envisage that everybody gets equal access, but no. We are still seeing the disproportionate access to natural resources. And this will be amplified by natural disasters, economic policy changes, climate events, or climate change. Anything that is unnatural, like say, for example, COVID, will create more inequality. This is the traditional thought process for any issue which is linked to natural resources. There is a natural resource, there is an existing social structure. Policy is supposed to give that distorted social structure a correction. But the implementation of that correction is very slow. But the use of these natural resources continue in the same pace. And because of that, there is already some inequality in the society. When a big event like a pandemic or climate change event hits us, the inequality will amplify. The same pattern will repeat across multiple scenarios. The same thing will repeat again and again. For example, I'll give you one situation. We have a traditional social structure where women face disproportionate household burden. And then we have had the pandemic where everybody was locked down. At that point of time, World Health Organization came up with the term silent pandemic, where women have to work from home as well as take care of the household work. Dual burden. Situations which are bad, when an external event happens, they get worse. This thought process repeats itself, and the state's existence is justified to correct this historical pattern. Everywhere when things get bad, state's presence is all the more important because it will stop the situation from turning from bad to worse. Apply that logic now in water resources. We have groundwater. As such, we are extracting groundwater. Nobody is questioning. We have if you divide the people or the segment of population who are using this groundwater, for the sake of our convenience, we will divide them into primary, secondary and tertiary sector. That is one classification. Or rural and urban. That is another classification. Whatever you want, you can take. Let's say water is there. Agriculture sector is using water. Are they quantifying it? Is there a cap on how much water you can use? Let's say you have more money, you dug a deeper bore and you're extracting with a very powerful machine, your neighbor is not getting water, and you question something. Is there a charge accrued for groundwater? Free. You have a, let's say, 50s florid building. On the side, you are constructing a small independent house. You are on the downward slope. Do you have any chance of getting water there? Can you do something about it? Then what kind of equity is this? See, the quality of democracy depends on how you treat your minority. That's what they say, right? Is it just about rights and sloganeering only? Or do we have policies that will actually protect when it comes to practical issues like this? Boss, I have a piece of land, I constructed an independent house next to a skyscraper that is sucking up entire water without leaving a drop for me. What do I do? Practically nothing. Your well doesn't have any water. How will it have, like, there is a huge building right next to you. It is taking up from the same aquifer. There's nothing that you can do. If you are lucky, underneath your ground, you will have a dedicated aquifer which needs to be recharged. Otherwise, you are gone. What will we do? So, things like this will not just have a social consequence, it will have economic cost too. Because now, let's say for example, if you are living in that house, if you want to make that house livable, what would have been free will now cost you whatever is the price for getting tanker every alternate day. Let's make it worse. Let's pollute that groundwater. That entire building is now getting tankers. Not only are we polluting, we are also extra cost is getting income. How much is that? What is the cost incurred? That is what these researchers were interested, and according to them, the World Bank estimates that environmental degradation, largely from polluted water and soil, drains India of nearly $80 billion each year, 6% of our GDP. $80 billion. Is this an avoidable situation? Pretty much yes. Yesterday we were talking about 50,000 crores just rotting in the Food Corporation of India godowns. 6% of GDP because groundwater is polluted. Similarly, you will have wastage even in food production. FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, it will come up with food waste statistics. There is another institute called World Resources Institute that will also come up with some statistics. Look at how much food is getting wasted because we don't have nice storage. And we are the same country that takes pride in the granary storages of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, where we can't have decent storage in 2025. It's not because we don't want to, it's because it's clearly not a priority. Chalta hai. Things can go on. Nobody questions. Do we have solutions? Obviously, yes. Then why aren't we acting? Any idea? Now this last part has got nothing to do with your UPSC preparation. I'm just asking, why do you think we aren't doing anything? Absolutely. Why isn't there political will? If you want to know the answer for this question, go back to your 2017 prelims. The quality of democracy depends on the wisdom of the people. You have your answer. After a pandemic, do you think health should have been a fundamental right? Write down in your notes. The threat of digital tradecraft in terrorism. See, this article is majorly about a transformation in our communication networks. If you take the example of how the traditional communication networks were and how it is getting transformed now. This transition is what is captured in the UPSC papers. So this article becomes very important for next year as an evolving theme. How non-state actors are evolving. What do you mean by non-state actors? Who is a state actor? Yes. Okay. How many of you are done with your internal security? You know the syllabus of internal security? GS3, internal security. You know which paper it is, right? GS3, internal security, state and non-state actors, communication networks is one of the syllabus pointer. Please by heart your syllabus. Another reminder. In that, why are we studying about this communication networks? From prelim standpoint, this communication networks can be clubbed under the heading of science and technology. In main standpoint, this will be brought under the heading of internal security. The technology part will be tested in prelims. The use case will be brought in mains. Clear? What do you mean by communication technology? Can you tell me any communication technologies? What do we use? What is the technology here? What is the name of the technology of your phone? What is that G? 4G, 5G, 6G? What is it? What does LTE stand for? How many of you are still using LTE? Vivo, LTE, what is it? Long term something? Any idea? What is the logic of communication technology? 8th standard physics. What is electromagnetic spectrum? Can we use X-rays for our phones? Why? How many of you cleared this UPSC prelims examination with the logic that anything that you see in science and technology is all the above? Basics, please. Get back to basics. What is electromagnetic spectrum? If you use a energy frequency that can literally burn your skin, anyone with basic common sense will not put it on your cell phone. So what is the prerequisite to understand what I'm talking about? That electromagnetic spectrum. E is equal to h nu. What is this h? I don't want to listen to your justification that you are not an engineering graduate or a science graduate. This is there in 8th or 10th class. Planck's constant. E is equal to h nu. What is lambda? Now, let me ask you this question. What is wavelength? This one or this one? What is this? So, what is this? What is the difference between amplitude, frequency, wavelength? No more questions, huh? Okay, anyway. See, basically, everything is related to energy. Where do you think Earth gets its energy from? Sun. That's the most basic thing. Solar energy. Is the entire energy reaching the Earth? Only a part of it. What part? What part of the spectrum are we getting? Visible light spectrum, any idea? 400 to 700 nanometers. Why am I teaching you physics now? Anyway, I'll get back to the article, but you need to know that, otherwise it will not make any sense. Simply put, I'll try to simplify the story. Energy, if you want a lot of energy, I'll remove this mic. The farthest that I can be audible is probably this room. And I'll have to shout more energy. But if I have to address a crowd that is very far, I'll use a mic. Their wavelength becomes important. If I have to take the packet of energy from here till there, wavelength becomes important. I might not be as clear as I would want to be, because my priority would be to reach there. If I want to be clear also, I will have to use a much more powerful mic, and it will incur a additional cost. Clear? This is the logic of communication devices. 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. What is this G? Generation. What is the difference between generation to generation? Speed and clarity. You all know that. So, if you want packets of internet data to move from one area to the other, let's say there is this person A who is in Hyderabad, wants to talk to his friend in let's say Delhi. If you were communicating through a satellite phone, the signal should go from here and come back here. If you don't have intermediaries, it's like the difference between a quick courier versus normal India Post, which will go at its own pace. And there is no guarantee it will go in a single piece. It might get dismantled also. This was the first generation of communication. Over a period of time, when you put in many more intermediaries, it became much more efficient without losing clarity. So that's how our YouTube, which started buffering, is no longer buffering now because of improvement in the packets of data that is received by your phone. So let's say YouTube is sending one packet of data. You don't have as much energy in the previous versions. So you wanted to make it much more quicker. So you put many more intermediaries, and that's how it became quicker and quicker. Essentially speaking, if you want to put much more energy, frequency will increase. Okay? That is how we started with radio waves in communication, and as we moved for, we are now at microwaves. To understand what I'm talking about, I want you to go back and see the electromagnetic spectrum. We started at radio waves, we moved towards microwaves, not the microwave oven. Don't compare this and that. Okay? So what happened here? We are able to send with much more clarity, but they can't go farther. You can run with a single phone like this, but if you have a truckload of phones, the farthest that you can go is probably next lane. You will take it till next lane and dump it on some other guy. He will go and dump it on some other person. So you will have a relay of many such delivery boys who will make it easier for that communication to be intact without losing its original state. They will safely take that packet and deliver it to the destination. And it is not possible to have both clarity as well as distance in a single go. You will have to spend money. That's why 5G technology is much more expensive to set up than previous technologies. Now, when you have so many relay points, even if one relay point is broken down, your entire communication network will get disrupted. I'm oversimplifying things. It's not like if I break this, you don't have an option. It will probably find something else. But what I'm trying to say is the number of devices will increase the vulnerability of the communication networks. What if there is a terrorist attack which will kidnap one of the delivery boy here? So this person is waiting for the packet that he's supposed to get, but this guy is kidnapped somewhere here. All these people are sitting idle, have nothing to do. And once their vigilance is down, these people are also kidnapped. You have nothing now. The entire system is hijacked. And that exactly is the threat that our security agencies should be careful about. Clear? So when we are talking about communication networks, the most basic funda is the cost that will come when we want efficiency. So any technology that will talk about the change in the quantum of security and change in the technology itself will become important for prelims from a prelim standpoint. So every time you get a question on communication technology, you need to go back to the basics of this equation. You can't have energy as well as distance both at the same time. Please remember this. Clear? These are important concepts, and that's the reason. If you don't understand, you will not follow this. So what is this article talking about in this latest case? Have a look. What happened there when you have NIA, which is the investigating agency that has also the mandate of UAPA. Okay. So this organization will have some extraordinary powers, and they found out the nature of the explosives there. What happened there in the operational planning of this entire terrorist attack? The organization that was responsible behind this investigation found out that firstly, they were using some encrypted communication. What is encryption? Encryption simply refers to a communication methodology where you have to cover, like with the usage of math, you will be covering the underlying message. I'm oversimplifying things, okay? So it's like you need to crack a puzzle to actually see what is the message, and it's not that easy. So if a platform uses this encrypted messages, even the investigating agencies will find it difficult to crack. They will crack most of them, but not all of them. Okay, that is the first problem. Next, you have to know dead drop emails as a concept. What is this dead drop email? Spy style. The suspects apparently used a shared email account to communicate via unsent drafts. You just save them as drafts. When can you intercept? Only when the message is saved. But what will happen if you're saving it on draft? You log out, the other person logs in, and you can read the message. That is drop dead emails. Reconnaissance and ammunition stockpiling. What happened here? There were multiple recce's conducted by these people. What happened here is there is a possibility. I mean, it's not covered in this article, but it's a possibility that even these terrorist organizations can hack into, let's say, Ola or Uber to get real-time data on traffic using the same underlying software of Google Maps. And there is nothing that these organizations can do about it. It's not that easy, but it's a possibility. They're exploring that angle. Then they have operational discipline. Even they have discipline. they require even more discipline to outsmart the investigating agencies also. So what did they do? Basic thing. The same thing that, for a different reason of course, please put your phone away. They also did the same thing. They switched off their phones. They cut all the digital ties after the arrest of the Jaish-e-Mohammed associates who were involved in these operations. And most of them were academically well-to-do, like they were intelligent. They know sophisticated technologies and they were very well educated. Otherwise, it would have been difficult. They were able to use technologies like VPNs, and they were also leaving very minimal digital footprint, as we have seen in the case of drop-dead emails. This is a complete contrast from increase in the sophistication that we were expecting. When the entire investigating agencies were focused on intercepting a message, they did not bother doing that. They just saved it in the draft, which is a very big challenge, because if we have to take cognizance of unsent emails, you are literally giving legitimacy to a surveillance state. If you want to store all the unsent messages or the deleted messages that you will have, if you want to store even that, first of all, it is an additional cost to the company. Second of all, how will you filter them? With increase in technology, sometimes counterintuitive thinking like this will also have new set of challenges. Okay, so we are looking at a scenario where it's a mix and match of these kind of traditional communication with new age ideas. Clear? Today's class has been a bit more lengthy intentionally because it involves concepts and methodologies of thinking which I want you to replicate across different articles of the same theme. So the next time you see an article on communication technology, whatever discussion we have had today, please use the same line of thinking. Okay, that's it for the day. Thank you. There is one more article on very important judgment on tribunals. There is also one more important article on women. The other day we were talking about violence against women. Today we were talking about the care burden for child care. How women are disproportionately affected by that. We will cover those aspects in the women theme as well as the other judiciary themes when we are consolidating. We are expecting the retirement of our Chief Justice, and every Chief Justice before he retires will come up with a slew of reforms or some judgments. We will consolidate all of them in the month of December and finish them all in a single go. Okay, that's it for the day. Thank you.